we just talked about like what the racism and stuff like that, and it's basically systematic stuff like that was going on in the NFL. So we thought it would be great today to have our first. She's going to be the Jackie Robinson of Let's Chop It Up. Reason behind she is the first Caucasian person we had on Let's Chop It Up. So with further ado, our sister, Dr. Hephzibah. I hope I pronounced that right. If not, correct me, smack me silly. Jamie. Yeah, there we go. All right. What's up, sister? How you doing?
Hello.
How you doing? Hey,
it's great to be with you.
How you doing?
Good to have you. It's good to have you.
Two quick things. It's Hephzibah.
Hephzibah.
But all my students call me SP.
SP.
I have a hyphenated last name, so
SP. All right, I'm gonna make sure I say SP.
And two, the word Caucasian is not at all politically correct.
All right.
It actually comes from this dude who thought that the women from the Caucasus regions of the mountains were particularly beautiful, so he started using the word Caucasian. So I actually prefer the word white if we're gonna.
All right, cool.
That's real.
That's real. That's what's up. That's what's up. That's what we.
Little sidebar.
No,
that's what we here. We here to learn. We here to teach each other.
As black people, we get it. Shoot.
Yeah,
we definitely get it. We get it.
Listen, my friend said female on what's that thing? The Clubhouse thing, and they ripped into him. So that was a whole nother conversation. So I'm learning every day.
Sex and gender not the same.
So, doctor, like some of the things like we talking about, like you heard us talking about with the NFL going on and stuff like that, and also what you witnessed at the Capitol and all these things that we have seen in certain rooms. Like you said, you might be in certain rooms that we're not in, like with white people. What are they saying if you're in those rooms, and what are their thoughts on how do you address them when they see somebody like yourself and they assume that you might be with them on the same mindset? What happens? What goes on in that?
Wow, that's a great question. To be totally honest, I'm not in a lot of those rooms. I think like most people who are critical thinkers and are here to fight for humanity, we're not talking to those people because we've cut them out of our lives for a reason, right? Like once we find out who you are, I trust that. If you know that's where you're at, we're done. With that said, as a professor, when I'm in the classroom, I have a whole different orientation, right? So like, if you're at the bar, you just meet somebody and they say something ridiculous, goodbye. I'm done. I'm not really going to try and engage with you. But in the classroom, I have an obligation to engage and to work with you and to help you get better, right? And get that information. And what I find is that most people who believe this nonsense, who have fallen in line with what the racial hierarchy has told them, they just lack the information. I mean, most folks who come, so I teach like an intro to race and ethnicity course, but that's what it's called. But really I say it's an intro to race and racism, right? Because race and ethnicity means nothing without racism, right? So what I tell students is, I start off with a lot of history, right? About enslavement, about genocide, about the theft of Mexican land, about the oppression of Chinese workers, about the internment of Japanese communities, all of the ways in which white people and whiteness have structured our society to only benefit white people. But when you're white, you aren't taught this, you aren't told this, you're just a fish in the water, right? You're just swimming in what you know. And our government and our society strategically keeps this information out of our schools, right? So many times college students come to me and they're like, SP, I don't understand. Why didn't I know this? Why wasn't I told? I feel differently. And I'm like, well, you weren't told because if people were told, I truly believe there would be a revolution tomorrow, right? But we're kept in the dark in order to keep it going.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Can I ask you a question? We've heard this word microaggressions before, all right? And for those who don't understand, what are microaggressions and how do they affect our awareness? I think I understand, but I'm just trying to understand a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. So microaggressions was coined by Pierce Chester, I think. But to refer to like the slight insults that he said that Black communities experienced, although all communities of color experience them, right? And also other oppressed communities experience them. So women, LGBTQ folks, etc. But they're the more insidious, daily, small, little remarks, like that stuff that people often go, wait, is that what they meant, right? Was that them just being racist? It's almost more like Gerald Wing Sue wrote a wonderful book on microaggressions if people want to learn more about it. And Sue says that he feels in some ways they're almost cause more pain than an outright racist statement, because you're sitting there investing the psychic energy trying to figure out whether the comment really was racist, right? So for example, the other day, I just moved into a building and a fancy, like bougie new gentrified building. I got the New York City housing lottery, so now I have.
Oh, okay.
Congratulations.
Okay.
Unheard of. So I'm in this bougie building now. It's very weird. I'm still trying to figure it out. But anyway, so my Black friend comes to visit me, and I'm like, hey, I come downstairs to the first floor to get him, and I'm like, hey, I gotta get a package out of the package room real quick. So he's standing by the elevators waiting for me to get the package. And while I'm in the package room, this other white dude walks up to him and is like, I'm sorry, do you need help? Or you need something? And so then I come out, right? And then he sees we're together and he's like, right? So that's a, really good example of like, he's going to say he didn't mean anything by it. Well, we all know what was meant by that, right? Mm-hmm. Like this implication that you don't belong is a microaggression.
Let me ask you a question. So, Sister Jane Elliott and stuff like that. So how do, like, when you get like certain Black students in rooms, when they say, okay, I'm gonna take this class on racism, and then you're the teacher, like, oh shoot, what happens when that first interaction and those things? I know how I've seen things before with Jane Elliott. I just want to know how does it happen? What's your experiences with those? Yeah,
so I teach race and ethnicity. I teach race and housing. I teach African American communities. So a lot of my courses are centered on race and racism. And, after a while at a college, you build a reputation. And so students of color talk and they let each other know, like, hey, like, she's good, don't worry about it. But when you first get into a college, they don't know you. And of course, some people don't know you. I find I just address it on the first day, right? And I'm like, hey, probably not what you expected. So I'm a white person teaching a class about race and ethnicity. Let's talk about that. Let's address the elephant in the room, right? And so, what I tell them, my philosophy is, if this were a course about how it feels to experience racism, then obviously I couldn't teach it, right? There's no way. But can I teach you a class on the sociological structures that maintain the racial hierarchy, that continue to keep the systemic racism alive? That is information I can facilitate and help us collaboratively learn about, right? And then it's a process of continuously trying to do the right thing, And so I will tell you, white students say stuff in my classroom, that they've probably gotten away with in other spaces. And that does not fly in my classroom. And I will call them out on it and I'll say, let's have a conversation about what you just said. Nothing again, it's not personal, but we need to have a conversation about it. And, they get upset, but then they realize that, like, we're all here to learn, and if you say something that's effed up, I'm gonna call you on it.
Professor, you can curse on the show. You can curse on the show.
All right.
Yeah. Curse and keep your teeth white. Go ahead.
Professor, chop this up for me if you can. I'm hearing a lot about the expression allyship. It's especially as it relates to corporations. Could you expound a little bit on that?
Yeah. Well, I hate the word allyship. Let's get that out there. You know, allyship, I think at the beginning, it was like good intentions, you know, and I understand why it came about, but it's gotten co-opted. And like you said, you know, businesses have bought into it. So, you know, oh, I'm going to put a Black Lives Matter sign up here. I'm an ally. And now, you know, like I've done it all. I'm good. And I don't have to do anything else. You know, I've worn my t-shirt, you know, or I've put up my sign. And it's wretched. And so many activists, including myself, we've tried to move the language from ally to accomplice. Because as an accomplice, that means that you are invested. That when somebody says something, you're gonna speak up. When your comrades call you to action, you're gonna show up and you're gonna listen. You're gonna say, how can I help? Not how can I lead, right? But how can I help? What do you have going on and how can I contribute and help be effective in this fight, right? An accomplice means action. And, you know, I see this a lot in meetings. So, you know, people, so like an administrator and somebody in power, right, will say something fucked up at a meeting, right?
You learn quick. We do. You going right in.
I gotta get drop the F-bombs. Drop the F-bombs.
Drop dumb shit.
Drop dumb shit.
Yeah, let's chop it up.
Classroom too. It's just
we all adults here. We all adults.
But you know, an administrator says something fucked up in a meeting, and you leave, and then you know a white person will whisper, "Oh, that was messed up." Da, da, da. Well, then why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you? You can't say something after the fact and then pretend like you're with it. No, you need to be out there. You need to be vocal. And, you know, my rule of thumb, my saying is, you should not say the phrase rule of thumb, by the way. That harkens back to domestic abuse. You know, if the people in power like me, then I'm probably doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I used to notice that when I used to work for the police department, there were certain people where, you know, they were skin folk, but they wasn't kinfolk. Where if they were too good in with the higher anarchy, then you know that they were selling you out. Right. But Doc, I want to ask you a question. I remember when I went to John Jay College and I took a course in about how certain neighborhoods and I can't remember the course off the top of my head, it was a long time ago, how certain neighborhoods and communities, why are they that way? So I noticed, and I want to know that you have the same problems with maybe white students, but I noticed when history was brought up by the professor, I noticed that a lot of the white students had a problem with the history lesson about it, and they were in deep denial about it. And I noticed too, that I notice every week, there were certain students dropping out of the course. You know what I'm saying? Do you see that problem in your classes? But I want to finish this before you ask, because the thing is, and I think the reason that they don't want to accept history is because it's not what they were told. You know, this word is, they don't like history, they like his story. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But go ahead.
Yeah. I rarely have people drop a class. Maybe if they're going to drop, they tend to drop the first day. After I've given them my little spiel, they're like, oh, this is not for me. You know, and they leave. But they do have a lot of questions. I work with a lot of primary material that they can't debate, right? Okay. I use direct quotes from the white people of that era, right? Okay. I show them journal excerpts. I use President Jefferson's speeches. I show them the pictures. And so when you use this information that is really fact, it becomes a little bit harder for them to just say this isn't real. Yeah. I will also say, of course, I have a very different perspective in teaching a race and ethnicity class because I'm white, right? So white people tend to be way more likely to listen to a white person teach them about racism, right? Because of the racism. So when they hear a professor of color say the same exact things that I do, right? They'll go, oh, well, she's biased.
Well, you're right, because the professor was Black in that course that I was taking. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Wow. So I got a question from Miss Sally. How can we truly dismantle racism in this country when we as Black people are exhausted and explaining our daily experiences? Oh, it's up on this side too. I'm sorry. Experiences, and it seems like Trump supporters are so far away from understanding it.
Yeah. So I'm a believer that we have to have a revolution, that we have to have a new constitution be written. Our constitution was written by white property owner, slave owners, patriarchal, capitalist pieces of shit. And we're still working with this same document, trying to make it work, right? And putting Band-Aids after Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid, right? And it's like the leaky pipe, and we just keep on trying to fix it. And then it breaks and it bursts. And I don't think we can effectively work with this government system that we have. Other countries have come to this realization, right? Like lots of other countries have gone, we need to press reset and start over. But the United States is, they're too proud of themselves to say, you know what, we need to press reset. We need to start over. That's my personal philosophy. I have a TEDx talk on what I call the white supremacy flower, which is basically like a flower is like an analogy for the history, right? So if the roots of our nation are like the roots of a flower, right? And then the stem grows from that and the flower blooms from that, and it's constantly drawing from this. Well, you're going to keep on getting the same manifestations of white supremacy because that is your foundation.
Yeah.
Let me ask this question. I want to know. I had a woman ask me, a white woman asked me this question. She said she'd never heard the expression white privilege until she became an adult. And so she asked me, she said, Kelvin, I want you to explain to me from your own words what it's like being a Black person in America. And I thought it was a very interesting question, especially coming from her. I, in turn, would like to ask you, what is it like being a white woman in America? What does that feel, especially in your position?
Wow, that's a great question.
Did we lose it?
So I'm going to make this distinction between white as a racial identity and whiteness, which is the power invested in the racial identity of being white, right? So like, I am racialized as white in this society, and there's nothing I can do about that, right? I can't change that. I can't wish it away. I have white privilege, whether I wanted to not. I call it my white receipt, right? Because like, if I go into a store and I don't have my receipt, they don't question me, right? If I walk into a building, they don't question me. If I'm at the back of the store shopping, right, no one questions me. So I call it my white receipt.
And the police don't stop you.
Right. The police don't stop you, right? You go on, on and on and on with the number of daily, assumptions of innocence that you are given, right? The whiteness, though, I can try to the best of my ability to fight, right? So I can try and fight the power that is given to me by doing things like teaching a racism course, right? By trying to provide this knowledge, by being an activist, by writing, by, working with my comrades in the struggle to fight for equality.
So, Doc, let me ask you a question.
That doesn't mean you can just lay back and go, oh, that's the way it is. You know what I mean? Like, you got responsibility for it.
Since you're an educator, right, and you became the oversee the education system of the United States. President said, "We call on you, Dr. SP." What was your first thing you would do in the public school system?
Whew. I mean, I think the first thing we would have to do is make it equal with resources. Like public school systems are vastly funded so disparately. And obviously, things like safety and transportation, the presence of counselors versus the presence of policemen, right? All of this stuff. Like, we're not setting children up for success from the gate. And then, again, I'm an advocate of youth need to know the reality of the racial hierarchy early on, and people always say to me, oh, well, you can't talk about that. Kids are too young. They're too young to understand. Look, when I got my niece when she was 3, only 4, a book about plantation slavery. She lives in South Carolina. She's getting these messages all over the place, right? Already. Like, she lives in a subdivision that has the word plantation in it, right? So they're already getting these messages. We have to be more responsible about getting them the right messages. And this was a book that was written for children, right? It's a picture book to help them understand. And so people have already figured out that there are ways to craft this message for each age group. And we need to do a better job of getting them that information.
Yeah. So now, where do we go from here? What do you think? What would be the next steps? Like, wake up Monday morning, refresh. Corporations, like recently, I went to the stores, mall, with my family yesterday, and they all the black this, black that. Now they got the little pictures and support black this. What do you do the first day? Like, how can we start over? What's the reset? What should people be telling in their households to their children, to their loved ones? What would the conversations start with? How can we change?
I mean, like on an individual level.
Individual level, like how can we start? Like, movements and stuff start with 2 people. It goes to starts in then a basement, then a block. How do we get this message? Like, we have to change. What would be the messaging to get people to get on board with, like, we're coming to a browner America for one thing soon, in our lifetime, God willing. How would we tell them, like, it's going to be okay, that it's changing a little bit?
So this is difficult for white people to hear, right? I mean, a lot of the struggle we are seeing from white people is that they're afraid that they have to give up some power.
Correct.
Right? Mm-hmm. And guess what? You do, right? Mm-hmm. So I always use this example, right? So, like, here are the people up at the top, yeah? Mm-hmm. And they say to the people at the bottom, just work harder, right?
Yeah. Pull up your bootstraps.
And come on up, right? Exactly, right? Grab yourself your bootstraps and come on up and join us. And if you join us, we'll treat you equally. Just get up here, right? But that's impossible. The pie is only so big. The people up here have way, way, way too many resources and opportunities. Yeah. Right. What needs to happen for these people to come up is for these people to come down.
Correct.
It needs to happen. And we need to start saying to white people, you need to be ready to be okay with redistribution of resources and opportunities. Mm-hmm. Because that is what is fair and good for all of humanity. Yeah. It is good for all of us. Right?
Yeah, I think one of white people's biggest fear is losing wealth and losing power. That's definitely their worst fear, and that's why they will never give into it.
Yeah, that's people. That's average person's worst fear. Yeah. You gotta feel. You know what I mean? You gotta feel. You have to. They're too invested.
And then they have they also have a mindset that they feel like we're where we're at because we choose to be. They don't understand that there's a lot of things that were implemented to put us in a certain place.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And what they don't understand is that they are dehumanizing themselves by not loving all of humanity.
Correct.
And all white people need to work on their own humanity so that we can all be in a good, better place. And really, like, that sounds that's it at the end of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much.
But why do you think they're scared, like the history books and stuff like that? You say you start with white authors and historians. Why do you think they're scared to look at that stuff and hold that mirror to themselves? Because they always tell everybody else, look at y'all, do this, do that. But they never want to hold the mirror to themselves. Why do you think they're so scared of that?
Because you have to face...
You have to face some ugly stuff.
Yeah, right.
You have to face some ugly stuff that their ancestors have done in history, and they don't want to face that.
Yeah.
And that continues to be done. every day in the name of whiteness, in the name of maintaining this racial hierarchy. They would just rather turn the other way than confront the truth, because the truth is a violent, painful truth.
And can we start with reparations for the first conversation? Can that happen eventually?
Can we get reparations?
Can we get reparations? Can we get reparations?
That's right. Absolutely. That should have happened, how many hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
And it's, that's yet another violence that has not happened yet.
Yeah. So, Doctor, I know before we go, I know you have a book out. Can you tell us more about your book real quick?
Yes, thank you so very much. So, came out a few months ago. It's my third book. It's actually, you were asking about microaggressions. That's one of the chapters in the book. It's 13 different ways of understanding racism. So everything from microaggressions and implicit bias to white supremacy, white privilege, intersectionality, all of these terms that are used more frequently today, but that folks often just don't understand. And so you end up trying to Google everything or wiki everything or try and find the best blog, and you don't know what's good information. And so I worked really hard to put together a very accessible book that's almost like a handbook. And so you could read each chapter independent or read the whole book. There's discussion questions, there's definitions of key concepts that people often are asking for. So,
And so how can people find you, and where can they find the book?
So you can find me at my website down there at the bottom, and the Twitter handle. The book is also now available on bookshop.org, which I'm going to give a shout out to. They support independent bookstores, including Black-owned bookstores. So if you haven't gone there yet, I suggest it, because that's a really great place to support our community bookstores.
All right. Anything else you want? Yes. Anything else you want to promote before we go?
All right. And one more thing, support Ella Baker Day. It's a campaign to make a holiday in honor of Ella Baker, one of our greatest activists of all time, and honor the community organizing of women of color. Support ellabakerday.com. Actually, y'all had Donna Hilton on the show. She was a past Ella Baker Day speaker.
Mm-hmm. That's my homegirl. That's my that's my girl right there.
Yeah, so I was excited y'all had her on, and Ella Baker Day is coming up in April. We have Dr. Patricia Parker this year. It's a free event. She wrote a great book that just came out on the activism of Ella Baker. So and I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Damian Tillman for our buddy and friend for putting
that's our boy. DT. So thank you so much, sister. We love you. We appreciate you. Keep doing the good work. Thank you for being in the struggle and the fight with us, man. And keep on educating people. That's the thing. We need more people like yourself to keep educating on the front lines and changing they say young, they in college. Their brains are still developing. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. Thank you
so much for having me today.
Doc, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure.
And I'm gonna get we're gonna get your shirt size, you and Damien. So we gotta make sure you get shirts.
All right, wonderful. And happy Valentine's Day.
Doc, there you go.
I tell you.
All right. Take it easy, Doc. All right.